2.88. 2.88 billion people as of February 2023 say that they watch anime. That is over a third of the world's population. Now, let's narrow it down a bit. Where do you think the US ranks? It's gotta be number 2, right? Nope, that's the Philippines. Okay, but no less than top 5. Nope, look, let me just tell you. Not top 5, not even top 10, not even top 15. The United States is number 16 in anime popularity. Now, don't get us wrong, over 72% as of 2023 say they watch anime regularly in the US, which literally means that there's more people that watch anime in the US, but Japan has an even higher percentage of their population that watches it. So, okay, 72%. That essentially means that roughly 288 million people in the US say that they watch anime. But hold on, only 45 million have a Crunchyroll subscription. Now, yes, I know that Netflix and other streaming services have forms of anime, but I would argue that the core anime fan base that is really going to spend money and consume the media in other forms is most likely going to have a streaming service that is just dedicated to anime. Now, there are no hard numbers that I could actually find for this one, but how many people actually go out of their way to buy manga? While there was a 260% increase in manga sales in the US, I would argue that your common closeted Demon Slayer fan who watched the show on Netflix isn't running to Barnes & Noble to buy the entirety of the manga. No hate if you're closeted, by the way, we're here for you. Then there's an entirely different tier, the collectors and the mega fans. The people that aren't going to go out and buy just one manga for the aesthetic, but will buy the entire set to put on a shelf and never read. The people who keep up with the G-Kids and Crunchyroll releases, waiting for them to drop that movie or anime on Blu-ray. No matter how you consume anime, whether you have a basic Hulu subscription or you're subscribed to every streaming service that has any form of anime because you don't want to miss a show, there are many ways to consume this media. Hello all my people out there on the interweb, it is me, Hart, coming back at you in another video. And this is my legal anime journey. So believe it or not, this series has actually been in the making since... That's right, for basically 3 years now, I have been exploring every single way to consume anime. Pretty much every streaming service that's available in the US that has any form of anime content on it, I've utilized over the past 3 years. And even beyond that, over 2021, I can truly say I started to expand anime and manga collection. And this is not to call anybody else out in the anime YouTube community, but maybe I just haven't dug deep enough, but I really haven't seen anybody talking about what is the true 100% best way to consume this media. And maybe there really isn't one. As we said in the BT3 review video, thank you guys so much for the love on that, by the way, I truly want this channel to be for every type of anime fan, people who have been watching for more than half of their life, and people who literally have just got into it over these past few months. And once again, I just haven't seen any videos that have truly explained all the legal aspects of consuming this media. Now, yes, there's videos explaining what is the best streaming service, and maybe even explaining how to get your anime collection started and or manga collection started, but I want to cover every single one of those aspects in a series, and truly give you guys the 100% pros and cons of every single version. Now, lastly, before we get started, why do I call it my legal anime journey? Now, to be honest, this totally may just be like how South Park offs Kenny every single episode, because at this point, I'm always going to mention me being a voice actor and or some type of other content creator, so just kind of go ahead and get used to it. So once again, as someone who is a professional voice actor and overall someone who just works with anime and manga, and that is pretty much my dream, I'm always going to be active against piracy. But at the end of the day, as the title suggests, I don't think that we can talk about how physical anime got into the West without explaining its origins. And guess what? It was not legal, by any means. The 1960s. Astro Boy was the first anime to be introduced to America, and it was to relatively mixed and poor reception. The ratings were in the toilet because at the time, American people didn't like the idea of a cartoon character having traits and feelings. The show was taken down only a year after being on American TVs. Now, this isn't my anime era's video, coming super soon, so I'm not going to say every single thing that happened between the 1960s and the 1990s, but long story short, anime gained a massive popularity, especially over this time.
Susan, you have all the fun on this show. You just went to an anime convention, right? In Anaheim. It's a theme.
In Anaheim. The biggest anime convention in the country. People came from all over the world. It was so colorful. It was incredible. The highlight was, I had to write this down, Haruhiko Mikimoto was there.
Bless you.
He's the guy that created Robotech, which really brought Japanese animation to U.S. audiences. But take a look at this. This place was wild.
What was his name again?
Okay.
The 1990s, when anime truly started to hit its stride. In New York, the first anime convention was actually held. It was a small area where manga and anime shows were sold. These were completely raw and untranslated. And when they sold these, they actually came with translation magazines. So instead of having to wait in the mail for one, you could do it yourself. And it was because of this that subbing became very, very popular in anime culture. For my new peeps, the term sub is meaning it still has the original Japanese voice actors with English subtitles on the screen that are completely edited in to read along. In addition, the rapid use of the internet became very, very prevalent in the 90s. And many people, a lot of students in fact, actually ended up teaching themselves how to add in these fan subs in universities and colleges. Sometimes, in fact, students would skip the translation magazine altogether and put the subtitles on themselves, either through research or actually just knowing Japanese, and this is where the term fan sub came from. Now I can hear you asking, wait a minute, Hart, if it's a fan thing, it can't be that illegal, right? Which is actually a very, very funny question, because without an official license from the company that produced the anime, that's pretty not legal. And oh yeah, people were also doing this and so to stop fan subs, the American anime companies started the JLAED, and or the Japanese Animation Legal Enforcement Division. This company actually would hire people to give tips to lawyers to hunt down these websites that were creating fan subs and stop them with legal force. In the end, it actually hindered and stopped a lot of fan subs. This also meant more money for the American companies because at this time, this is when all of the anime companies started to put out their stuff on DVD. So where does that bring us to today? Well, throughout the 2000s, a few took over the space producing anime. Central Park Media, Family Home Entertainment, ADV Films, and of course companies like Viz and Funimation producing their own media. Then of course G-Kids coming into the production game around 2010, but that's worth its own video. And then, as you all know, the internet age started to take over. Netflix, Hulu, and of course Crunchyroll all eventually got to the point of giving you the access to watch this anime hours, sometimes even minutes after it airs in Japan, and even some of them producing their own anime. This is when anime, even though being in a relatively niche medium, really started to market to the big anime fans, the true weebs, if you will. It was no longer about trying to make you pick up Cowboy Bebop on DVD along with your 10th copy of Beauty and the Beast. It devolved into you have absolutely no self-respect. But this takes us to the first and original way to consume this media other than watching it live on TV: Blu-rays, DVDs, and other forms of physical media. Now, I know what you may be thinking. How is buying physical anime still surviving in a world where everything is just in a digital space and you can literally access any anime that you can think of on pretty much any anime stream? Me. It's people like me who pay prices like this for only half of a show like this. Now, I want to tell you guys my experience and overall the pros and cons of consuming your anime basically through physical media. So this is something that I have genuinely been asked before, not only about my video game collection, but about my anime and manga collection. Hard, how on earth did you get your collection started?
All right, sir, that'll be $128.73. Looks like I'm not eating this week.
Like I said, this series has been in the making for literally 3 to 4 years, and I'm gonna go in with a little bit of a bias on this first part because, not to spoil the final video rating, but this is one of my favorite ways to consume anime. I think even though people in my generation on average don't necessarily have a large anime collection, we all have that nostalgia for putting DVDs or even VHSs into their respective players to watch our favorite childhood movies and shows. And I feel like for me, that completely carried over. And I guess that's where this absolute love of having a physical release release of whatever my favorite show is comes from. And that pretty much leads me into my first pro, essentially outright ownership. Trust me, I absolutely love streaming services, and there's nothing like being able to open up whatever app on your phone, literally having access to your favorite anime movies and shows within seconds and watch them wherever and whenever you want. But again, this is where my old school mentality kicks in, because no matter what, when I go into a store or order something online and it comes in the mail, it's mine. It's not stored up in the cloud somewhere, and I don't have to pay a monthly fee to be able to watch it. And I think this is why there was a slight spike in DVD sales around and post-COVID. Well, yes, streaming went up as well, but there were so many families that pulled out that old game console or even old DVD player and popped in some of their favorite movies or shows when they realized that it wasn't on a streaming service, or it was behind a streaming service that they couldn't necessarily afford at the time. And it may have just been straight up cheaper to try to head out to a half-price books or something of the sort to get a used copy of that old show or movie, and that would have been infinitely cheaper. I just like to live by the mindset that you'll never know when it'll be convenient, or just whenever you get the urge to want to pop these in physically. Now, I guess this one can be a pro and a con, but it's just the overall issue of having a collection. Storage. So yeah, depending on your living situation, this can be an amazing thing or it can be a detrimental thing. On one hand, I love how creative and organized you have to be when you start to really grow a collection, or really any consumable media for that matter. It's so fun to see yourself sometimes not even being able to occupy a corner shelf of whatever media you have, to literally not having enough room and having to find ways to store it. But for some people, that's where it kind of gets rocky. You just may not have the space or resources to go ahead and reorganize or keep all of this stuff around. For example, this is pretty much what started happening with my own anime. While I have been able to make it seem like a little corner of anime in my personal game room, it doesn't take away from the fact that I literally have special editions and half of the Demon Slayer manga on the floor. Now, does this have to do with the fact that I'm too lazy to go buy another shelf? Yes. But it's also because my room is getting truly limited with the more stuff that I buy of this caliber. Even when it comes to my game collection, I just adjust it depending on what I have at the time. And sometimes that literally results in some games being on the floor for a while, and or having to be on display when in reality, I just actually don't have that much room. So once again, this one can be a bit of a blessing and a curse. I personally enjoy the puzzle of buying a new show and or game and having to reorganize, because that just means that my room is always being updated. But for you, it could be completely an inconvenience, and I totally understand that. Another clear inconvenience and or con in this case is definitely, here comes the money!
Here we go, money.
Yeah, like I said, back in the day, it may have been a little more accessible to get these various DVDs and even VHSs, depending on which one you got. And depending on which one you get, it actually may not be that bad. But that's the key phrase, depending on which one you get. Now, this is not criticizing any of these companies for charging what they charge, but some stuff is definitely not for everybody. Like I said, for example, the Demon Slayer Blu-ray. Season 1 is only 26 episodes, and it was split into 2 parts at launch, and went for somewhere between $40 and $60 depending on the retailer that you got it from. And I would say, even though Demon Slayer is probably one of the most popular current animes, it's not necessarily easy to find in a store. But then on the other hand, you have the G-Kids releases of the films, which I have praised time and time again. Now, while some of the Ghibli movies are quite literally 30 plus years old, these are still extremely popular movies that you can go and purchase for sometimes as low as $10. And at max, them being around $50, but those are usually the special editions. There are literally Disney films that are around the same age, and depending on the release of the movie, they're actually gonna want the same amount and more. And I suppose that's kind of the slight difference between collecting games and anime. Games, I can definitely say, especially if you find a store that suits you, you can easily build up a collection by just going in week to week and spending as little as $10, sometimes even $5 to build up a collection of games on certain consoles. In my opinion, it is very easy to build up an NES, SNES, or even a PlayStation 2 collection bit by bit, just because of how many games are on the console, and decent games even at that price. But you're not going to be disappointed if you decide to go all in and pay a tad more for a rare game. With anime, it's almost the exact opposite. For most people, there actually isn't a store that sells used, and if they do find a store that sells anime, then 9 times out of 10, it's going to be new stuff. I mean, you're not going to be able to walk into Barnes & Noble and find a copy of Comic Book Party on DVD. I mean, I did. No, you didn't. Now, of course, if you're lucky enough to have something like a half-price books and even any type of vintage stock type stores, then yeah, you'll be able to find mini gems that go from anywhere between $5 and $20. But I definitely would say around 8 times out of 10, if you want the good stuff, especially an entire series, then yeah, you might as well go ahead and start breaking out $80 or more. For example, one of my favorite releases of any anime ever is original Dragon Ball with the blue boxes. These aren't particularly hard to find because they're actually still in print. But if you want the whole series, then you're you're still going to have to end up paying over $100. Dragon Ball is overall a very, very popular show in the West, and this DVD collection sold and sells very, very well, but everybody doesn't have $100 to blow on an entire show, or more sometimes. Opposed to games with something like Final Fantasy X, for example, a game that did insanely well and sold a lot, so you can find an original PS2 copy of this for no more than $15 sometimes. That same courtesy and price range just does not translate over to anime. In fact, it seems like the more popular the show, then that's actually how much more you're going to have to pay. When certain games and game franchises, it's the exact opposite. Okay, I mean, not all of them. Oh my goodness, and don't get me started on various releases of certain shows. Take, for example, the original cut of Dragon Ball Z Kai on Blu-ray. This show actually ended up being printed twice, one time in 2010 and another time in 2014. But when it comes to Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball Super, this is when we start getting parts of these DVD releases that go as high as 7 and 8 seasons and or volumes, which is completely fine. But when you have a release like this where for some odd reason, some parts sold better than others, whether that be a lack of availability and or maybe that part was airing at the time so people actually liked it better, that makes getting a collection extremely hard. I like to use this and or even the original Ranma DVDs for example, because when it comes to Dragon Ball Z Kai, you can get part 5 of this particular collection for as low as $23 to $30, but part 7 and 8 can literally be in the 3-digit range depending on where you get it. This is all just because of discontinuation and specific releases of certain shows. This could be due to it being released under a new production company, or the company just wanting to re-release it and make it a lot more accessible, but in turn doing that, making the previous release basically obsolete and even more rare? Dang, and I know I said I was very, very biased, but I do like to bring my absolute honesty when it comes to even some of my favorite stuff, and 2 more cons that I have to mention are a pretty big deal. A way to watch and aging. Now, a way to watch these things has become way easier over the years. Blu-ray players no longer go for almost $800, and I'm sure that almost everybody who owns a TV has some form of a DVD player, whether you just straight up own a DVD player or some type of game console. But this can be a problem because, once again, everybody doesn't necessarily have the space and sometimes the money for something that specifically plays Blu-rays. Probably the easiest one out of all these is DVDs, because DVD players are the most accessible, and you can get one for as little as $20, and they really shouldn't take up too much space, but the elephant in the room on this one is...
Bro, please, bro, why you do...
Now, I know, it's a new day and age, and I know for a fact that not everybody has a VHS TV and or just a blatant VHS player lying around anymore. Now, while not being too terribly expensive, you can get one for anywhere between $40 and $120, and as long as you take care of them, they should last. But then you have to worry about getting a CRT TV, which once again can be relatively cheap, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend actually wanting to enjoy VHS anime without having the original aspect ratio and platform that it was designed to be on. Now, you can always get a VHS CRT combo where everything is already built in, but once again, those can go for as high as $200 and almost $300 nowadays, depending on the condition. So now, just because of the platform that you want to consume this on, you have already created another space issue and another money issue. Then, of course, aging. Now, while it might be years and years and years for these things to get old, VHS tapes will eventually die out. DVDs, depending on how you treat them, will get disc rot. Now, I see this as not as big of a con because this can totally be prevented just on how you treat everything, and nowadays, these refurbished machines are very, very common to obtain, and most game stores actually have them. But both of these things have to be considered when collecting and watching this way. So, wow, after that attack, I know you're sitting there asking, well, what's the reason at this point for buying it physically? And that's really the hard part that I have to tell you guys. At the end of the day, when you really look at it, buying physical media just has a tad more cons than pros. But for you as an anime fan and an overall collector, the pros have to outweigh the cons. For me, I don't mind having to find new ways to rearrange my space and accommodate for that stuff that I just bought. I don't mind having to buy a VHS player and or a DVD player when the old ones go out. I don't mind having to store my DVDs and VHSs a certain way to make sure that they last longer. Because for me, the act of actually owning this stuff on physical, not laying my confidence in a software that could eventually have problems, not to talk down on any of the streaming services or anything like that, but technology is gonna be technology sometimes. And I feel like one of the only ways that you can beat that is having a way to watch these in some form of a physical sense. Then of course, it comes down to your love of the medium. You may not see the merit in paying an outlandish price for some obscure anime that came out a while ago, Or why people lose their mind if a part of a show that they've already seen a million times finally gets found at a store or a con so they can pick it up. It's no different than a sports fan finding a jersey, or someone who collects music finally getting that vinyl that they've been searching for. When you have a love for whatever media you consume, I feel like there's going to be a part of you that's gonna want something tangible from it. And it just happens for me and this side of the community. We find value in preserving our media this way. While I may slow down depending on the situation in my life, I'll never stop collecting anime, manga, and games for that matter. There's always going to be a show that I haven't obtained or a game that has a special release that I just have to have or don't have, so now I have to go find it. And yeah, I know that I'll probably never make the complete collection where I'm completely satisfied, but I think that's actually part of the journey and what really makes it fun. This series is going to be one of my absolute favorites to make. I hope you all enjoyed it. I'm Hart, and I'll see you guys in part 2.
It's fantastic that
Love ya.
the two cultures can interface. And of course, being a guest here, I meet the Japanese people as well, and I get to hear what they say. And they say, oh, wow, this is so different than what we're having such fun here. And I love to see that. So you get to see both sides having the fun, and that's fantastic.